At this point, it's no secret that I love me some used Xeons, but Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge have gotten a little bit long in the tooth as of late. Well, it's time to say goodbye to those, and goodbye to even Haswell, and say hello to Cascade Lake. If you've ever thought about running your own servers for home or business use, but don't want to deal with the headaches of maintaining hardware, why not let Linode host your services for you? They make it simple to deploy and manage your own cloud infrastructure, with solutions ranging from a single shared CPU to massive multi-core virtual machines. You can even add in dedicated enterprise GPUs for machine learning. Linode also recently started rolling out high-speed NVMe block storage to all 11 of their global data centers. Best of all, storage rates will remain at the same low price they always have been. With shared CPU plans starting at as little as $5 per month and scaling up to as high as you need to go, you'll be able to find a hosting plan that fits your needs. They also have 24/7 365 support available, regardless of your plan size. That's a better support plan than I have on my personal server rack, I can tell you that much. Visit linode.com/craftcomputing and get a $100 60-day credit just for signing up for a new account. That's linode.com/craftcomputing. And thanks to Linode for sponsoring today's video. Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff, and it is time for another used Xeon workstation build. Now, I've done a number of builds in the past with Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge CPUs, and even most recently with an HP Z440 and a Haswell Xeon. But those Xeons are starting to be old news, and as it happens, I was browsing eBay the other night, as I so often do, and I came across this undocumented Intel Xeon chip based on Cascade Lake. This is the Xeon Platinum 8251C, a 12-core 3.8 GHz chip on the LGA 3647 socket. Now, first and foremost, the CPU is absolutely massive. In fact, it's about twice the footprint of a 2011 V3 Haswell-based CPU. And I think we can figure out why, as Intel seems to have found the right glue to stick two of these together. Now, up until very recently, Cascade Lake Xeons have been unattainable as far as price points go, often starting at $500 for even an 8-core chip and going well up from there. However, I picked up this 12-core CPU for just $199. The problem, though, is what motherboard can you possibly fit one of these into? For those who haven't kept up on used prices, LGA 3647 motherboards have typically started at around $400, and even on the used market, have not been creeping their way down. That is, until I found an HP workstation that just might fit the bill. Inside of this Cisco box is actually an HP Z6 Gen4 workstation with an LGA 3647 socket. Now, the funny thing is, I picked this up for only $279, but this workstation still sells brand new on HP for a starting price of around $1,500. So getting a bare bones unit with the case, motherboard, and power supply is one heck of a deal. So let's go ahead and give this thing an honorable unboxing and see what's inside. eBay shipping number 1. When you send someone a tower or motherboard, cover the damn socket. That, and there's just a pack of desiccant floating around in there, so who knows how many pins are possibly bent on this thing. This may be a very short video. Oh wait, I found the socket cover. Yeah, there's bent pins on it. Oh, crap. This video just got a lot harder. Welcome back to Craft Computing. As always, I'm Jeff. So, let's say you received a motherboard with bent CPU pins. How do you fix that? Great question. Let's dive in now. So, while I'm taking this out of here, it'll give us a great opportunity to take a look at all the actual specs on the motherboard and on the system itself, starting with the 120mm rear case fan. Oh wow, the SSD mounting on this is wild. You're gonna like this. So I do see a couple of SATA ports, a couple of M.2 NVMEs. We've got 2 X16 PCI Express slots, 3 X4s, and an X8. Now again, I picked up this Z6 Gen4 for just $279 shipped. So considering that LGA 3647 platforms usually start at about $400, you can see why this is such a great deal, assuming it actually works once I get it out of the box. Assuming it actually works once I get it out of the box. Assuming it actually works. Now, a couple things of note here. While the fans on this do use what looks like a standard 4-pin PWM for the most part, the power supply is completely proprietary to HP, and this is something that they've been doing in their workstations since, I believe, the Z420, Z620 generation. It's not a thing that I'm really a fan of, because it means if the power supply ever dies, you have to find an HP power supply to replace it with. You can't just use an off-the-shelf ATX, at least not without adapters, and then it just gets really messy from there. So the pins themselves are not bent too badly. You can see right up here, and I'll try to get a close-up of that before I fix it. That is where the damage is. There's probably about 4 or 5 pins there that are bent over and bent in the wrong angle. So hopefully I will be able to get a very small spudger in there and just kind of guide those back into place. It's not the worst bend in the world, and it's definitely something that I think is fixable. But before I go any further, I'm going to take a picture of the socket so I can warranty claim this on eBay. Because it should have arrived in working order, non-DOA. And with bent pins, it's considered DOA. And again, since I've got the motherboard in my hand, we'll go over some of the more unique aspects of this board and why you need to buy this in a workstation and not just as a bare motherboard. Starting with, this is not a standard ATX layout. Now, I know it looks like a standard motherboard, but you can see the rear I/O section of the board is actually offset from the rest of the board by a solid inch or so. Also, the screw locations are not where they would be on standard ATX boards. Now, the 3647 platform only ever saw one retail release for consumers, and that was the Maximus motherboard, as well as a couple others that had this socket, and one CPU that you as a consumer could buy, and that was the Xeon 3175X, an overclockable first-generation scalable Xeon. While it had 28 cores and 56 threads, it was kind of a short-lived enthusiast platform, mainly because Threadripper Generation 2 started coming out around the same time. That, and you needed about a 1000-watt chiller to keep that CPU cool at 5 GHz. But there are still some advantages to this platform, such as the 6-channel memory and the slew of PCI Express slots that are available over Intel's standard consumer lineups. And with all that out of the way, let's get to bending some pins back into place. So right up here is where the damage is at, and I counted about 7 pins after I did a macro photo right here. The damage is not that bad. There's only 1 or 2 pins that are bent at what I would call more extreme angles than I'd like to see. So I'm going to use this spudger right here, which has an extremely fine tip to it. And if that's not enough, I've also got a pair of tweezers with, again, almost like a needle type point to them. And I'm just going to kind of work these pins back to where they should be. You'll know you get them back to where they should be when they reflect light at the same angle as all the pins that are around them. Work nice and slow. You don't want to put too much pressure on the pins, because the last thing you want to do is break one of them. Lucky for me, it looks like something pushed them down, and so it's actually fairly easy to just kind of bend them back up. What you don't want to happen is they bend up and then try to get them back down, because you'll never get that angle quite the same. All right, so that is not bad at all. I'm actually really happy with the way that turned out. Like I said, the damage wasn't too bad, but the pins were definitely not in the right position. But I think I've got all of them back to kind of where they need to be. Spacing all looks good between the points. They're not drooping off. They're not pointing in a weird angle anymore. All right, now that that's taken care of, let's go ahead and get this thing back installed into the case, and we'll finally get to building this system. I'm liking this PC less and less by the minute. All right, now for all the assorted cables that plug in here. And one of my favorites is this front audio header, which actually has a little cutout from the motherboard, so this cable can route from the front. I don't know if they just forgot to add it and then needed to modify the motherboard late, but it's kind of an interesting design choice. Right up here are our motherboard connections. And as you can see, this one's kind of a pain to get in. And it's also very short and very proprietary. And while I was taking the motherboard out, my front UI cable for all of the buttons and lights actually fell off of the front of the case, and I gotta take that apart. And guys, isn't used PCs fun? Aren't used PCs fun? All right, so I got the system pretty much all back together. Got the motherboard back installed and the socket cover on there. But this is where I stop and leave you for about a week because I messed up. But I messed up in a way that is completely understandable for someone who's not familiar with these systems. I'm a little pissed off, and I'm not quite sure who to be pissed off more at, HP or the vendor who was selling these on eBay. $279, this is definitely, again, a fantastic deal for a case, a motherboard, and a power supply. But this is where those proprietary little HP things start to rear their ugly heads, because what I had inside of the case was a couple of loose cables. One of them was a USB 3.0 connector, and the other was somewhere, was a connector for the, oh, right there, for the front I/O. And this was just loose in the bottom, and I thought that I had pulled it out while I was, removing the motherboard in all of my haste. As it turns out, there's a little card that sits right here that handles the front I/O for the HP. And it is a 100% proprietary unit with an SD card reader, a power button, 4 USBs, and a front audio connection. Long story short, without that card, there's no way to power the system on. I'm thrilled. Are you thrilled? So now I get to spend $60 on this proprietary card in the front. And by the way, this seller has hundreds of these for sale. They've sold, at the time of filming, 162 of these Z6 Gen 4 systems, all of them without that front card unit, probably because they could sell the front card unit for a profit somewhere else. All right, I'll see you all in a week.
1 week later.
All right, it's a week later. I finally have a power button for this thing, and I think I've earned a beer. So, like I mentioned, this did cost me an additional $60 to the $279 I'd already spent on the Z6 G4. It's not necessarily a required component, but if I didn't buy it, there would be a gaping hole in the front of my PC, and I would probably have to drill out a momentary press power button. This does just plug into a standard I/O header, but I didn't want to roll with that, so we went ahead and spent the extra $60, and it's not as great of a deal as it would have been otherwise, but hey, now we've got some front USB ports. All right, let's get on with this build. Aha. Please fit. I'm mad at myself right now. I had a feeling that the cooler wouldn't fit, but because it was a 120 mil rear exhaust fan, I assumed that I would be able to fit a 120 mil tower cooler in. See you next week! Oh, hi. We learned a lot this week. That's what we do on Craft Computing. We make mistakes, and we try to learn from them. So, what mistake this time might I have made? Well, one that resulted in me needing a new motherboard. HP, in their infinite wisdom, and I'm not going to exclude Dell from this list either, because they're on this list too, they like to use proprietary fan headers. Now, at their core, they're still just PWM and delivering 5 volts with a sense wire. There's nothing really exotic about the way that the fans work on an HP or a Dell system. However, the fans are not your standard 4-pin PWM that you see right here. In the HP, they can be either a 5 or a 6-pin PWM, depending on which exact model of HP that you have. Now, in the case of the 5-pin, all they did was take the ground pin from pin 1 and attach it to pin 5, and that's why I've soldered on this little jumper wire right there. However, you run into a problem if you plug in this ground wire to the other side of the cable, which is what I did. So I ended up sending 12 volts to the PWM line. And now I need a new motherboard. So, the build that will just not stop giving, gave once more in the form of a brand new user-pulled $200 motherboard that we're now going to install. But I think that is finally the last component, after I've replaced almost everything else and bought parts that weren't included in the first place, to getting this thing up and running. So, let's get to that. I'm not nervous, you're nervous. So, the system is all together. Honestly, at this point, I don't even remember what's inside. I think we are dealing with an HP Z6 G4. We've got a Xeon 8251C 12-core, 24-thread CPU, 192 gigs of DDR4 ECC registered memory, a Titan XP, and two 800GB M.2 NVMe drives. Beyond that, there's really nothing left to do but fire it up and see if it finally works. Here on day, 23 of this one-day build. Oh, oh. Hey! It's alive! It hasn't posted yet, but it didn't blow up either. Oh, that makes me feel happy. Now, let's see if it actually, turns on and works as a computer. Not just a smoke show. But I think whatever happens here, I'm gonna have to go down with this ship one way or the other. By the way, craftcomputing.store, we've got our new TOS-inspired merch. So, if it wasn't obvious from the numerous attempts at putting the system together and the current results of just getting beep codes with or without memory installed, this build seems pretty cursed from the beginning. Let's talk about it. So, just when I think I have everything that I absolutely need to go into this workstation and make it finally work, you literally can't make this up. The system did not want to post. And I wasn't sure why until I pulled out the CPU that I had bought. And we'll get a close-up of this, and we'll put some B-roll on the screen, but this CPU was very obviously dropped before it was sold to me. And so, as Linus found out, you can't exactly drop these and expect them to bounce all that well. Herein lies the problem. I bought this on eBay, and while I probably could have sent it back and gotten my money back or even a replacement CPU, I had so many problems putting this machine together that it's been now 30 days since I received this, and I didn't notice the damage when I first pulled it out of the package. So the chances of me getting my money back for this $200 CPU now are pretty much bupkis. Well, that's okay. I have an Intel 4210 Silver Xeon that we can test the system with and at least see if we should move forward with this project and spend a little bit more money, even though it's literally cost me double what I thought it would when we started. So I put that CPU in, we loaded it up with HP-branded memory, mind you, and nothing. The result is what you just heard, whether there's memory in the system or not. All we get is a pre-boot memory error code, which says either replace your DIMMs with genuine HP DIMMs or check to see if you have a dead one. I know for a fact all of these sticks are working because you saw them in my last video with my 1U 8-gamer workstation or server build, where I allocated basically all 256 gigs of memory in that server to different tasks within that server. The chances of there being an error on this memory right now, also bupkis. So where do we go from here? I've done a video on this channel where I yelled at HP before, and this kind of feels like I'm going the same direction, although not all of this was HP's fault. Obviously, HP didn't bridge the PWM fan header and blow the previous motherboard. That was on me, but HP did use a proprietary interface of a standardized 4-pin fan connector that caused me to do that. HP didn't send me a damaged CPU, but HP is restricting what memory you can use to boot on an HPE Z6 Gen 4, and they've done this on numerous other systems before. I know in particular Gen 8 systems for the server realm are very picky on the specific memory modules that you can use. So, I think that's it. This was supposed to be a really cool $600 build that showed off a 12-core, unbranded, no documentation Xeon in an HP workstation that should have gotten some pretty decent performance. Instead, it's turned into almost literally $1,000 out of my pocket, and it's gotten to the point where I can't keep going with the sunk cost fallacy. At some point, I just have to walk away and admit defeat. And I think that's where we're at. So, this is obviously not the video that you all wanted to see, and definitely not the video that I wanted to produce. But the sunk cost fallacy is a genuine thing, and I think I need to walk away. I could go and spend another $300 to $400 and replace this one-time find of an 8251C Xeon that I only paid $200 for, but to what end? Am I going to use this workstation on a daily basis? Probably not. It was going to be a fun thing to show you guys that you could build yourselves. And at the moment, I don't need any extra spare parts. I have no ideas what I should do with this system. Do one of you want it? I'll literally ship it to you as is. The memory's not included, but you can have the motherboard and even the cooler and the case and everything else. Just pay me shipping. It's yours. I don't want it. I don't need it. You can have it. If you have any other ideas for what I should do for this, in the meantime, by all means, leave me a comment down below. On your way down there, make sure to drop this video a like, or in my case, a dislike, and subscribe to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. Head on over to craftcomputing.store so you can help fund stupid projects like this and check out our new TOS line of t-shirts. And if you want to really help support the channel, make sure to join the Patreon. Link is also down in the video description. That's going to do it for me in this one. Thank you all so much for watching, whatever this was. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. And this is why sysadmins drink. Beer for today is from Matchless Brewing Company. I don't remember where they're from, and honestly today, I don't care. Beer for today is from Matchless Brewing Company out of Tumwater, Washington. It is the Westward Whiskey Barrel-Aged Imperial Stout with vanilla beans, cocoa nibs, and cinnamon added 2022 edition, clocking in at, I believe, an even 10%. This is a different kind of stout for sure. So I had Rhett try it because I've had like 4 or maybe even 6 of these pints because, well, they were $5 on clearance at my local bottle shop. It's a fantastic stout. I find it to be a little bit lighter bodied than you might expect for an 11% beer. But the flavors are definitely just as intense as you might expect. I know it's whiskey barrel aged. I'm not necessarily getting like the bourbon and the oak and the vanilla and flavors like that. I'm getting a little bit more of like a sour mash kind of flavor to it. But I think that works tremendously well in this beer because with the vanilla and the cocoa and the cinnamon that they've added to it, it almost gives it kind of like a chai type feel. It's definitely a rich cocoa kind of flavor. It's very smooth, dangerously smooth. and just something a little bit different than your traditional heavy-hitting, pours like used motor oil, barrel-aged Imperial Stout. I like this one.